Welcome to the channel once again. It's your man, the GH Hertzman. Today, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about Cacao, aka cocoa. Ghana's cocoa. That's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, let's go.
First of all, it's cocoa. What are the current situation of farmers in Ghana? What is government doing in terms of solving the current looming crisis in the cocoa industry in Ghana? What are the formal reforms that government plans to undertake to help sanitize the cocoa industry, specifically the Cocoa Board of Ghana? We're first going to look into the history of the current Cocoa Board of Ghana, also known as the CMB. Initially, it was formed in 1937 during the colonial era by the British Empire. So this CMB metamorphosed into the current Cocoa Board of Ghana, or the Ghana Cocoa Board, as we all know. And it's been known over the years. So CMB came about in 1937, and when Ghana was under the British rule. So what prompted the formation, or what stimulated the formation of the CMB, or the Cocoa Marketing Board, in that era? What happened was that the Ghanaian cocoa farmers realized that these European merchants who were buying cocoa directly from these farmers were cheating them, were underpricing and making huge profits from these farmers, just to their detriment. So farmers decided not to sell again to these European merchants. That was smart on these Ghanaian farmers. Yeah, so what happened? The British government by then, the colonial masters by then, decided to investigate. They decided to look into what prompted, the boycotting of sales of cocoa to these European merchants. So they instituted an investigation by setting up this commission, which was known as the Noel Commission. So the Noel Commission was set up, and it looked into this fracas between the European merchants and the Ghanaian farmers. And it came to conclusion that these European merchants were actually taking advantage of the Ghanaian farmers by underpricing cocoa and buying them at very low prices, and the farmers were losing. So the British then came up with the formation of a Cocoa Marketing Board known as the CMB. By then, this CMB commenced operations as a West African cocoa marketing company in 1937. So this went on, and then eventually, when Ghana gained independence under Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, this West African cocoa marketing transformed or metamorphosed into Ghana's own CMB, which eventually in 1979 changed into the current Ghana Cocoa Board that we are all talking about, which is now in the news big time and is making all the headlines. So what is actually happening in Ghana in terms of cocoa? I think Cocoa Board will be about 80 years. Cocoa Board is currently 79 years, and hopefully by next year they're gonna be celebrating their 80th anniversary since its inception. Cocoa Board has transformed by undergoing various reforms over the years, and these reforms hasn't significantly changed the fortunes of this agency under the government of Ghana. So currently, there is an ongoing crisis What is this crisis? There is a conflict in terms of this agency, that's the Cocoa Board, not buying cocoa beans as it should and not paying on time to farmers to also use those proceeds to take care of themselves and their families. This has created a whole lot of headaches for authorities managing cocoa purchasing and onward sales in Ghana. Came out to explain circumstances under which Cocoa Board finds itself, circumstances that led to the current position that Cocoa Board finds itself. Dr. Randy Abe granted an interview and explained the factors that led to the current crisis that Cocoa Board and farmers are going through. He alluded to the fact that in the previous administration, the previous officers of Cocoa Board, between the year 2023 and 2024, besides the huge contracts awarded for sacks to be imported, those road contracts and all that, let's put those aside. Besides all that, they were involved in this syndicated loan program or module where the Cocoa Board secures a loan, and so in that syndicated loan module, what happens was that Cocoa Board has something like a forward contract to supply cocoa beans in the future. So what happens is funds are given to Cocoa Board. Cocoa Board forwards those funds to its LMCs, like the licensed LBCs or whatever, licensed cocoa buying companies. And these cocoa buying companies then purchase the cocoa beans from farmers. Cocoa Board takes over and then exports to its international buyers or whatever. So
in 2023, 2024, you know how the syndicated loans are done. So you have a situation where there is a crop forecast and then there is a price forecast. So let's say there's a crop forecast of 600,000 tons for the year. Then there's probably maybe also a price forecast of $5,000 over the season. Now, Cocoa Board would look at how much it requires to purchase the crop for the year.
Okay.
And so on the basis of that, it will then authorize the cocoa marketing company to go and sign contracts to that value. So let's say if Cocoa Board needs $2 billion to buy the crop, it will then ask CMC to perhaps go and sign contracts for, let's say, 500,000 tons out of the 600,000 at not less than $5,000. Now, CMC will then go and sign these contracts with the buyers of the crop. Now, these contracts are what Cocoa Board will take to the consortium of banks, the syndicated banks, as collateral. And it's on the basis of the value of these contracts that the banks, the syndicated banks, will then give out a loan to Cocoa Board. Now, in 23-24, Cocoa Board failed to honor 333,767 tons of cocoa that it had sold to these buyers at an average of $2,600.
So these are forward sales?
Yes, $2,600, but it failed. It could not supply them, the first time in the history of Cocoa Board. So these were rollovers priced at $2,600 that we inherited at a time when cocoa prices had shot up. So this was a big challenge. So what it meant was that you then had to use high price cocoa to then service this contract.
Because you had been logging at 2,600.
And cocoa prices were then at 12, 11, 10, and 9. And that is also where when the syndicated loan collapsed, the 23-24. So 24-25, Cocoa Board actually issued a request for proposal, and the banks did not respond.
So they had forward sold cocoa, but they didn't have the liquidity.
They didn't have the cocoa.
They couldn't supply the cocoa to
yes.
supply.
So it was rolled over to the next season. And this cocoa had been sold at 2,600.
So when the high price came, you couldn't even benefit from the high price?
No. In fact, we even ended up making losses, because then the price which was given to the farmer, the farm gate price, the producer price for the farmer, was $3,100.
But have you been able to clear that backlog in the first
year? We cleared 235. We cleared 235 in the first year. But what it meant
was about
that,
2/3 of that.
So what it meant was that for every ton of cocoa that the LBC paid the farmer $3,100 for, that you used to service this contract, you had a debt of $500. Which is so so you have a double whammy. One, your inability to benefit from the high prices, and two, the debts that you were incurring as a result of the shortfall between the farmer price and how much those contracts were sold for. And here we are not talking about 30,000 or 50,000 tons. We are talking about 333,767 tons. So if you were going to have a yield of 600,000, you are talking about more than 50%.
Okay. So you've labeled up.
Runs a forward contract with its buyers. And these buyers help secure funding. And through this funding, Cocoa Board buys cocoa beans from farmers and then sells back to them. But it focuses on, it projects its production. I mean, its production level in terms of the amount of cocoa beans that will be produced in the coming year, the coming season. So it uses those projections to actually come up with figures as to the amount of funding that they're going to need to supply a particular amount of cocoa beans. So this has been ongoing for a number of years. It's been ongoing for about 32 years now. And this funding module, being the syndicated loan program, hasn't worked for Ghana. Ghana rather stands at losing in terms of going through this program. What happened was, in some of these previous syndicated loan agreements, the Cocoa Board had a contract to supply in excess of about 333,767 tons of cocoa, which is almost like half of its yearly or seasonal production. And that wasn't supplied in the previous government. People will go like, why do problems of the Cocoa Board always being referred or alluded to the fact that the previous administrators didn't take very good care of it? But that's the facts are there. These were contracts signed in the previous government, which weren't taken very good care of. Those cocoa beans were not supplied.
That was declared, and of course the farmer share. That also clearly showed that there was something, but what exactly the issue was, nobody could tell. And you remember that is what brought about this issue of the farmers were being cheated. They should be paid 6,000 or 7,000 and all that, because we all could tell, we could see what the world market prices were. I mean, as high as 12,000, came to 11,000, 10,000, settled on, let's say, an average of $9,000 over the year. And obviously, if you have an average of about $9,000 across the season, and your farmers being paid 3,100, which will constitute, let's say, maybe about 30%, obviously there will be a cause for concern, because we know that generally the farmers are paid between 60 and 70%. The NDC manifesto said that they will give the farmers 70, and that is exactly what happened, but generally 60 to 70%. So when you have a situation where the world market prices on the average was about 9,000, and like I said, it went as high as 12, 11 and 10, but let's use the 9,000 as the average across the season. If it were 9,000 and farmers are giving $3,100, then it presupposes that the farmers are getting about 30%. And I'm sure that that was the reason why those who said that it should be 6,000, 7,000 made those statements. But it was not until I got to Cocoa Board that I then found the reason why it was 3,100 and not all those figures that people were speaking about.
Okay. Give me the top 3 key issues without necessarily breaking it down. I want highlights because earlier I spoke to Dr. Isaac Yao Opoku, so I'll bring those highlights. But I want to know, so debt, what is the debt situation you met? What is the sort of financial situation? Just some big highlights.
Okay. So first of all, I mean, year end 2024. Okay. So that is then what I took over, what I inherited. I mean, had a debt of 32.9 billion cedis. 32.9 billion cedis. Cocoa Board had a negative equity of 3.8 billion. End of year 2016, Cocoa Board had a positive equity of about 1.8 billion. 2024 year end, negative equity of 3.8 billion, almost 3.9 billion, which presupposes says that Cocoa Board's liabilities were more than its assets by close to 4 billion. The first time in the history of the 79-year-old company. Next year, Cocoa Board will be 80 years. So this is what we inherited. We inherited a cocoa road exposure of 26 billion cedis.
Now, is that part of the 32?
No. So only 4.4 billion of this exposure was part of the debt, because the 4.4 billion were certificates that were sitting at our cash office. But the 26 billion were contracts, road contracts that Cocoa Board had awarded. 26 billion. But the 32.9 billion includes only 4.4 billion of these 26 billion contracts, cities contracts awarded. Then,
so those weren't supplied, and that's another factor which has to be looked into. All those holding those press conferences here and there, were they not there when those loans were signed? Were they not aware that the Cocoa Board had a forward contract, had a contract to supply this specific number of cocoa beans to buyers, and that wasn't done? So now the issue is, as price goes up, Cocoa Board stands to lose, because they're not going to take advantage of the current, maybe if it's like $10,000 per ton, they're not going to sell at that 10,000 per tons. But based on the previous contract, which was probably maybe at 2,000 or 3,000 or something, those sales will be based on the contracts previously signed. So if it was signed at a lower price, definitely they have to stick to the contract by supplying their buyers at the same price. They can increase it even if it goes up to like 12,000 or 15,000 or whatsoever. They have to stick to the terms and tenets of the contract. That was what they did. So they were buying at a higher price at a point and selling at a lower price to its buyers. So farmers were selling at, let's say, 3,100. Cocoa Board buys from them at 3,100 and has to supply to its buyers who previously maybe signed a contract at a lower rate. So who stands to lose? It's Cocoa Board that is losing funds, not making profits, and even running into the negatives in terms of its books. This thing has been ongoing for a very long time, and I'm very happy and glad that government is taking steps to correct these anomalies. So in a press conference organized by the Minister of Finance, Dr. Atuforsin, he outlined steps being taken by government to correct all this. Government is coming up with reforms, and a bill, the cocoa bill, will be laid before Parliament. And this cocoa bill has specifics, and he outlined some of this in his press conference. So as we speak now, government is initiating strong reforms at the Cocoa Board. And these reforms will transform how things are done at the Ghana Cocoa Board. This is what the Minister of Finance has to say, Dr. Atsuforsen. He outlined the steps taken by government to, correct these anomalies at the Cocoa Board, and also bills being laid before Parliament for discussion to come up with laws that will protect farmlands, cocoa farms from galamseyers
or other trading decisions. This was due to the financing model invented in the year 2024-2025 when the syndicated loan failed. Under that model, the buyers financed the purchase. By 2022, Cocoa Board finances had deteriorated badly. It defaulted and restructured the cocoa bills in the year 2023. For the first time in the history of the cocoa industry, in 2023, the annual syndicated suffered significant delays due to the loss of confidence in the Ghanaian economy and the sector. The first tranche was received on 22nd December 2023, 4 months after the commencement of the season. Cocoa Board projected an output of 800,000 tons and committed 786,672 tons in contracts in 2023 and 2024 crop season. However, actual production was 432,145 tons, a deviation of over 45% from the projected output. Variation in crop forecasts typically vary between 5 to 15%. Hence, a deviation of 45% was unprecedented and unacceptable. This resulted in a huge rollover contract of about 333,767 tons at an average price of $2,661 per ton. This resulted in a loss of over $1 billion United States dollars, which would have gone to the cocoa farmer or other stakeholders. In 2024, Cocoa Board could not pay the final tranche of the syndicated loan, which was due in July 2024, and received a 70 million United States dollar bridge finance from the Ministry of Finance to avert a default. Despite a commitment to repay the 70 million bridge finance owed to the Ministry of Finance, Cocoa Board defaulted, highlighting the dire financial strait of the organization at the time. This debt has since been inherited by the current administration and the current management of the Ghana Cocoa Board. Now I will take you to the proposed reforms. A careful, and I won't say proposed reforms, these are reforms that are going to implement immediately. A careful review of the cocoa sector over the last 8 years revealed gross mismanagement, which requires immediate and comprehensive reforms to address the challenges in the sector. Cabinet has therefore decided on the following reforms to guarantee a fair price to the cocoa farmer, secure the financial viability of the cocoa sector, and ensure the long-term sustainability of the cocoa industry. To bring relief to unpaid cocoa farmers, Cabinet has accordingly directed the Ghana Cocoa Board to commence immediate repayment of all affected cocoa farmers. 2. A new Cocoa Board bill will be presented to Parliament to implement an automatic adjustment of producer price to align with movement in the world market price, exchange rate, and other key variables, and guarantees a minimum of 70% of gross FOB price to be paid to the cocoa farmer. A new financing model for cocoa purchases and related operations with associated benefit for increased processing will be introduced effective 2026-2027 crop season. The current financing model was invented as a necessity after the syndicated loan failed after 32 years of successful implementation, and it was proven not to be sustainable. In fact, it has proven not to be sustainable. The financing model is entirely dependent on the buyer's willingness to bear the financing costs and to pre-finance the purchase of cocoa. The key motivation for buyers in the previous season was the rollover contract priced at a rate of $2,661 per metric ton, when the existing market price were above $8,000 per metric ton. Once the gap between the rollover contract and the market price closes, and the majority of the rollover contracts are serviced, the buyer will not be willing to pre-finance the purchase of cocoa crop. Alternatively, the previous syndicated loan model requires that Cocoa Board sells forward most of the raw beans to lock in the contract, which repays the loan and serves as collateral as well. This system did not allow Cocoa Board to optimize prices on the market. In addition, the use of raw beans contract as collateral for the loan meant that Ghana could not optimize its installed capacity for processing.
The mechanism where prices of cocoa will be based on price at the world market level and then the current exchange rate of the cedi to the dollar. All those factors will be taken into consideration in coming out with a producer price for farmers. Then also we talked about government's plan for value addition in terms of Ghana being able to produce, Ghana being able to locally process most of the cocoa beans in Ghana's own cocoa processing company, the CPC, will lead the charge in processing cocoa locally in Ghana to add value. Besides that, the PBC, that's a cocoa buying company. Cocoa buying company, the PBC, will be the leading purchaser, the leading buyer of cocoa directly from farmers, where local companies will locally process most of these cocoa beans to add value to the final products before export overseas. And there are numerous companies in Ghana with capabilities of processing almost 50% of Ghana's cocoa beans locally. And this is going to go a long way to create jobs, sustain this local cocoa production industry, and also that will be good news for farmers, as there will be ready market available locally to purchase the cocoa beans for onward processing.
Yes. So one of the key decisions we've taken is that we're going to stop foreign funding for the purchase of our cocoa. We are going to raise domestic bonds. We have enough cedis in Ghana to pay for our cocoa. We're going to raise domestic bonds, buy our own cocoa. We don't need to collateralize the beans. I know the interesting part. We have the capacity to process 400,000 tons of those beans, processing capacity in Ghana, but because the beans are collateralized, we cannot even allocate those beans to the local processors. We have to ship all the beans outside. Now, if we buy the beans ourselves, we can take 400,000 tons out of the beans and give to our local processors to add value. That is what the Accra research is about. I say by 2030, there are not going to be any raw mineral ores leaving Ghana. You're not going to ship manganese ores out of Ghana raw. You're not going to ship bauxite ore out of Ghana raw. You're not going to ship iron ore out of Ghana raw. You must process all that locally. That is the only way we can provide opportunities for our young people.
With the new financing model, Cocoa Board can sell beans of any volume to local processing companies to promote value addition and job creation. Cabinet has, however, directed that with immediate effect, the remainder of the beans for the crop year 2025-2026 should be allocated for domestic processing. Cabinet has also directed that beginning from 2026 to 2027 crop season, a minimum of 50% of all cocoa beans should be processed locally. And this will be part of the Cocoa Board bill going to Parliament. Pursuant to this, the state-owned cocoa processing company, CPC, will be revived as a matter of priority to become the leading processor of Ghana's cocoa beans. I've also, this morning, together with my colleague, the Minister responsible for Trade, Agribusiness and Industry, met with domestic cocoa processors cutting across the private sector, who have indicated that they have the capacity and the willingness to process more than 50% of Ghana's cocoa beans going forward. An agreement has been reached on the immediate implementation of this policy. In order to address the indebtedness inherited by the current management of Ghana Cocoa Board, Cabinet has further directed that the Minister responsible for Finance, myself, to urgently seek parliamentary approval for the following. 1, to convert the legacy debt of about 5.8 billion Ghana cedis owed to the Ministry of Finance and Bank of Ghana. Cocoa Board currently owes the Ministry of Finance 3.7 billion Ghana cedis, which arose from the conversion of non-marketable cocoa bills into a loan, and the Bank of Ghana another 10-year loan of 1.38 billion Ghana cedis. The debt conversion will restore positive equity and boost the international and local market to support the operations of the Ghana Cocoa Board. This will strengthen the balance sheet, obviously, of Ghana Cocoa Board to enable it implement its new financing model and the reforms. Cabinet has also directed that, with immediate effect, there should be a transfer of road liabilities worth 4.35 billion Ghana cedis to the Ministry of Roads and Highways and the Ministry of Finance. From 2014 to 2024, Cocoa Board owed cocoa contractors. From 2014 to 2024, Cocoa Board awarded cocoa contracts of up to 26.5 billion Ghana cedis, with 21.5 billion Ghana cedis of contracts awarded between 2018 and 2021. Despite an agreement under the IMF program in 2023 to rationalize Cocoa Board's commitment of 21.7 billion Ghana cedis to 6.9 billion, the previous board and management of Cocoa Board failed to conduct this exercise. The exercise has subsequently been completed under the supervision of the Ministry of Finance and the Minister responsible for roads.
Yes.
Against your local, and by the way, what's the sector looking like in terms of the value addition? The Barry Calibo plot, ADM, and all these
CPC,
niche cocoa, are they? How do they have the capacity to take on more of our beans?
So currently installed capacity is, I think, about 560. But if
560 what?
560,000 tons.
Okay.
But if, let's even say that the functional capacity is even 400,000 tons.
Wow.
Let's even
wow.
The functional capacity is even 400,000 tons. What it means is that at least
over half of your crop can be bought locally.
Yes, can be processed locally. Now, what that also means is that it sends a signal to would-be processors that if I set up in Ghana, I can be guaranteed.
But don't forget that if you sell to these guys in cedis, you also lose some of the FX you get from selling.
You don't have to sell to them in cedis.
Can they buy in dollars?
They buy in dollars anyway. The local processors buy in dollars. Whatever they buy from Cocoa Board is bought in dollars.
The government has also directed the Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Ghana to write off all the loans, to write off all the debts in the books of Cocoa Board, and all those debts will be shielded by the Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance. Besides that, all road contracts awarded will also be transferred to the Ministry of Roads and Highways. So from henceforth, the roads and highways will be in charge of all cocoa roads and all those ongoing rural road development and whatever construction under the Cocoa Roads program. The Ministry of Roads and Highways will take charge of that. And this will streamline the way those contracts were managed. The Roads Ministry will also look into that and then manage it in a way that will benefit all Ghanaians. Around, there is news circulating about the threats from the West African countries, Ghana's neighbors, from Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Ivory Coast, and even Burkina Faso. This looming threat has to do with the level of production, the enviable position of Ghana in terms of global cocoa production. Ghana is currently ranked as the world's highest producer of cocoa globally. And this position has been targeted by some West African countries who have also ramped up their levels just to get the second spot. The aim of there are also some Asian countries who have also targeted this enviable second position that Ghana is occupying globally in terms of cocoa production. And what are these countries? A country like Indonesia is also doing well. Ecuador currently has also been seen ramping up its production. Mexico is producing as well. And even our close allies, the West African country Nigeria, is also ramping up its levels from 390,000 tons to about 500,000 tons in the near future. So these are all threats coming directly to Ghana's, coming directly from Ghana's rivals in terms of being a cocoa producing country. But locally, Ghana's problems, or locally, Ghana has been confronted with some domestic problems, not to talk about the international rivalry that we are currently experiencing from other cocoa producing countries. Domestically, Ghana is faced with numerous problems in terms of management. No, let's talk of production, at the farming level, to management, to even sales of the cocoa beans, and even securing funding to pay for these beans for onward sales to buyers, and even value addition in frauding. Value addition is another factor that has been a headache to Ghanaian authorities. Value addition has been a problem for some years now. Historically, I think Cocoa Board will be about 80 years. Cocoa Board is currently 79 years, and hopefully by next year they're gonna be celebrating their 80th anniversary since its inception. And the minority is trying to take advantage of that. Not only taking advantage, they have actually taken advantage of this situation and trying to score some political points from this debacle or crisis. This, to me personally, shouldn't be considered as a point for this personally shouldn't be considered as a way of scoring political points, as the minority is currently doing in Ghana.
First of all, we are of the view that the Republic of Ghana did not need an emergency cabinet meeting just for the purposes of discussing how to pay cocoa farmers. When you have to call an emergency cabinet meeting just for the purposes of discussing how to pay cocoa farmers, then there's a real crisis in government, which you are covering up with some numbers and some narratives. In the previous MPP era, payment of cocoa farmers was a matter of regular procedure. Now emergency cabinet meetings are being called just to discuss how to pay cocoa farmers. But to the more substantive argument, first of all, the announcement that Cocoa Board should immediately pay them, that announcement is of no effect. Because that announcement presumes that Cocoa Board has the money and was deliberately refusing to pay the farmers. Is that what was going on? No. Because if this whole press conference is about the fact that the government went to a cabinet meeting and has instructed Cocoa Board to pay the farmers. Seriously, it raises more questions than answers. Because unless you are saying that the money was available and Cocoa Board was refusing, then what the government should be doing specifically is instructing that emergency liquidity assistance should be released to Cocoa Board to pay the farmers, not an announcement that they should be paid. But we don't want you to forget the two main causes of the crisis we're having in the cocoa sector now. Two main causes. Number one is that the new managers of the cocoa sector have reset the trading program of Cocoa Board. We used to sell about 70% on forward sales and 30% on spot. They argued that that was an incompetent approach and decided to change it. And now they are selling about 70% on spot. That is why today, as prices have dipped, they are struggling and are saying that the price they had announced ends up being higher than the current prices on the market. That's number one, because of their own decision to reset the trading model. Number two is the artificial injection of forex into the Ghanaian economy, which has overvalued our cedi, as Dr. Amin rightly explained, and is therefore making our exports relatively more expensive. Remember, we've been raising this matter for a while now, and when you say, they say, oh, dollar has come down, clap for us. Now we are beginning to see the effect, at least in the first area, in the cocoa sector. This action to announce a 28% reduction in the price amounts to a haircut of about 28% on close to 1 million Ghanaian cocoa farmers. You may not recognize it. 28%, 28.6% reduction, this 28.6% haircut is going to affect about 1 million cocoa farmers. And if you add to it the number of people who assist them on the farms and their dependents, my gosh, we're getting to maybe 3-4 million people are going to be affected by this haircut that the NDC government has announced. You see, when you manage an economy with artificial adjustments, the real effect will be realized on cocoa farms, in transport fares, in electricity bills, in school fees. Now you are beginning to see the real impact of some of the things that we are talking about. And it is now clear that this NDC government cannot be trusted. When the MPP moved cocoa prices from 475 Ghana cedis per bag to 3,100, they told the people of Ghana that we were robbing them and that they should actually be getting 6,000 to 7,000 Ghana cedis. And just about 1 year in their tenure, they could not even pay the 6,000. They now said 3,650. No.
And 25.
3,625. And even that one, they can't pay. They have to call an emergency cabinet meeting to announce that Cocoa Board should pay. And then after that, they announce a 28% haircut on the poor Ghanaian farmer. One of the impacts, and that's what I want to conclude with. Already when you go into the cocoa growing areas, I was in my areas just a few days ago. A lot of young people are already not going into cocoa because they say the older folk who went into it, they don't see a transformation in their lives. It's left with the old, elderly, poor on the farms. When you do this, what is going to happen in subsequent years is that even those ones will not be going into the cocoa production. If they won't sell their cocoa farms to Galamsey operators, God knows what they will do. They will abandon their farms. Now, what it means also is that the productivity, the growth, the jobs, and the incomes that come from the cocoa sector, the foreign exchange that comes from the cocoa sector in subsequent years is all going to dwindle. And so we in the minority have a number of requests to government. All of this has come about because of the reset that Cocoa Board did. And that is why, respectfully, we ask the president to relieve the Cocoa Board CEO of his responsibilities at this point in time. Number two, we are asking the government that in previous times when cocoa prices fell and the government absorbed the shock and protected the cocoa farmer, the NDC government should absorb the cost of what they have done and protect the cocoa farmer and restore at least the 3,625 that they promised.
Then again, opposition organized a press conference in the cocoa farm. I call it the Bush Press or the Bush Press Conference. Watch the opposition, aka the minority, aka the elephant, organizing its own press conference. No wonder it's an elephant. organizing a press conference with farmers on a farm in a bush. Watch that.
Can I make reference to a cocoa farmer saying they cannot do this? Look, if you organize your food soldiers and then start interview them, why? Didn't we see Miracle Abuaji and
Oh, so the cocoa farmers are food soldier now.
Wait. Don't twist it. Look, come on. We started this work together.
I know, but you are saying the cocoa farmers are food soldier of the party.
If Miracle Abuaji is a cocoa farmer, Miracle Abuaji is a cocoa farmer.
But it's not
Listen. You go and gather your party food soldiers under a cocoa farm, cocoa tree, and then you ask them to be talk. You see, they are not even smart of doing propaganda.
But hold on, let me ask you.
So in all this, Paul Adomotri threw a jab. Who was he jabbing? Personally, I'm suspecting the CEO of CocoaBoard. Adomotri talked about square pegs in a round hole. I mean, people being put into positions without the technical know-how to manage those positions or offices or those portfolios. He talked and gave an example of the National Communication Authority or stuff like that. He also talked about specifically the CocoaBoard. And who heads the CocoaBoard? It's Dr. Randy Abbey. So indirectly, he's shooting at Randy Abbey. This is what he said. So, according to Paul Adomotri says CocoaBoard is not a common sense job. It requires a technical expertise. That's what Paul Adomotri is saying about CocoaBoard. So the story says, this is a story from City Newsroom. It says, the host of Good Evening Ghana, Paul Adomotri, has called on political leaders to ensure that appointees to key positions possesses the necessary technical expertise to occupy those positions. According to Mr. Adomotri, the ongoing challenges at the Ghana Cocoa Board highlight the risk of placing politically connected individuals in technically demanding roles without the requisite experience. The issue at Cocoa Board is bringing to the fore the conversation that politicians must understand that when a new government takes over and they are distributing political positions, some of these positions are purely technical. You can take your person there, but make sure that such a person is technically competent. He drew comparisons to other high-profile appointments, saying that the same standards applied when appointing an attorney general or the governor of the Bank of Ghana. From what we are seeing from Cocoa Board, if you want to put someone who is a seasoned treasury banker over there, that will be fine. Or even a seasoned lawyer who will also work. It is simply not a common sense job, he added. So personally, who else Cocoa Board? It's Dr. Randy Abbey. So Paul Adomotri is saying Randy Abbey is not technically qualified to occupy that position. Hey, you are super in same because of politics. People can just come out and say all sort of things. This problem were created by you, Paul Adomotri, your family, your elephant family. And this is the time these issues are now coming up. All we have to do now is to stop pointing fingers, like I said, and rather find strong, amicable, sensible solutions to this problem and solve it once and for all. This should be seen as an opportunity for both parties, on non-partisan basis, for this looming threat, for this problem to be solved once and for all in the national interest. Rather, what are they doing? They have organized, like as I've seen in some videos, people have organized press conferences in farms, encouraging farmers to talk against the current government. We shouldn't be. Did these same people organize press conferences on the farms when they were being paid at higher rates? That never was done. That didn't happen. So why are they now trying to paint the current government in black? Government is seriously, as I've read, as I've seen, working tirelessly behind the scenes to solve this problem. Of course, these farmers are all Ghanaians and they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity by being paid what is due them for their toils, for their sweats, and for their time. This shouldn't be used as a political ground to score political points against one's opponents. Amicable solutions should be found to these problems. This has to be nipped in the bud as it is now before it explodes beyond the control of all of us, beyond the levels that cannot be controlled. These are strong questions. These are questions that those past officials or authorities of the Cocoa Board have to answer. No wonder Atuforsen's press conference also touched on steps being taken by government to activate or push the Attorney General to start investigating old contracts that were awarded, operations of the old officials of Cocoa Board. These are properties of all Ghanaians and they must be investigated. All contracts awarded should be looked into. Why the need for it? Where is the funding coming? Who benefited from all this? All that should be investigated. Whoever is found to have involved in any fishy deal must be dealt with the law, must be dealt by the law. The law is the law, like their lady said. Whoever is found in any fishy deal must face the law. That is the best way to control some of these governmental agencies from their reckless spending and reckless awards of contracts. Time is now, and we must act now.
To ensure accountability and transparency in the management of Cocoa Board and the cocoa sector as a whole, Cabinet also directed the Attorney General to commission concurrent forensic audit and criminal investigation into the activities of Cocoa Board over the last 8 years. And I repeat, Cabinet also directed the Office of the Attorney General to commission concurrent forensic audit and criminal investigation into the activities of Cocoa Board over the last 8 years. Cabinet has directed the Ministry of Finance to initiate also immediate reforms at Cocoa Board to streamline their operations and cut costs. Wasteful and uncontrolled expenditure practices are to be curtailed immediately. The world market price has dropped significantly from the average of 7,200 tons to 4,100 per ton, making Ghana's cocoa beans uncompetitive and creating liquidity challenges. To address this, the Producer Price Review Committee, PPRC, met this afternoon under my chairmanship to assess the challenges facing the sector and review the producer price for the remainder of the 2025-2026 crop year. In order to cushion the farmer, the PPRC has recommended that the farmer be paid 90% of the achieved gross FOB of $4,200 per ton to mitigate the adverse impact on the farmer as a result of the fall in the world market price. As a result of that, the PPRC thereby announces that effective today, Thursday, 12 February 2026, the new producer price for the remainder of the 2025-2026 2026 crop season will now be 41,392 Ghana cedis per ton and 2,587 Ghana cedis per bag. This measure has become necessary to reflect the reality of the world market price of cocoa, ensure the injection of immediate liquidity for expedited payment of farmers, and guarantee the sustainability of our cocoa sector. In conclusion, government wishes to convey its sincere appreciation to the Ghanaian cocoa farmer and all stakeholders for their forbearance and sacrifice over the years. Cocoa has always been the mainstay of our economy, and wish to assure them that these reforms will protect the interest of the cocoa farmer and the cocoa sector. In fact, we strongly believe this will transform the industry. Thank you very much.
This leaves the books of the Cocoa Board very clean, and it's going to give them the opportunity to explore different avenues, to form partnerships, to look into new investment opportunities, because their books will be clean and people will be willing to partner them to set up new ventures, all in the interest of Ghana. And then also, management should be streamlined. Management should be prudent in their spending in terms of how purchases and contracts are awarded going forward in the future. So they're going to start on a clean slate. And that is something very laudable. And I look up to that day when Cocoa Board will be making profits rather than making losses, and all farmers will be smiling to the bank and will be proudly saying, I am proud to be a farmer. I educated my kids by being a cocoa farmer. I built this house through the profits I made through the sales of my cocoa beans. Or I became a cocoa farmer and I've never looked back, and I've gained so much, and Ghana has given me so much. With all these factors taken into consideration, with all these measures put in place, I believe Ghana will hold on to its second position as the world's global second most producer of cocoa, or the second highest producer of cocoa globally. And the threats coming from our West African neighbors and even from Asia wouldn't be something to be so much worried about. I also look forward to the day where Ghana will claim its position as the world's leading producer of cocoa globally. This has been achieved for several years, and it can still be achieved in the near future if things are done right, if things and measures are put in place, if systems are working, if checks and balances are being taken care of, if people are held responsible and accountable for their acts and actions. There is great hope. There is a future for the cocoa industry in Ghana. Let's all help farmers. Let's all